The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the small town of Willow Creek. The streets were quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves blown by the cool autumn breeze. Emily Carter tightened her scarf around her neck as she walked home from the library where she worked. Her arms were full of books she'd borrowed to read over the weekend, mysteries, romances, and a few biographies that always seemed to inspire her somehow. Emily was the kind of person who noticed things others often overlooked. She saw beauty in the little details, the way sunlight filtered through tree branches, the laughter of children playing at the park, or the faint scent of rain lingering in the air after a storm. But today something unusual caught her attention. As she passed by the old wooden bench near the park's entrance, she spotted someone sitting there hunched over and shivering. At first glance, he looked like any other passerby, but something about him struck Emily as odd. His clothes were soaked from the earlier drizzle, clinging to his frame uncomfortably. His shoes were worn out, almost falling apart, and his face was shadowy under the dim streetlights. He wasn't moving much, just staring blankly ahead, lost, in thought, or perhaps despair. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should approach him. After all, it wasn't every day you stumbled upon strangers in such a state. But then she remembered her grandmother's words. Kindness costs nothing, but it can mean everything to someone. Taking a deep breath, Emily stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said softly, holding her umbrella above them both to shield him from the light drizzle that had started again. "Are you okay?" The man startled slightly, as though he hadn't expected anyone to speak to him. He turned his head slowly, revealing tired eyes and a weary expression. For a brief second, Emily wondered what could have brought this man to such a low point. Was he homeless? Had he lost his way? Or was there something else entirely? "I'm fine," he muttered, though his tone suggested otherwise. His voice was rough, strained, as if he hadn't spoken in days. He tried to shift away from her umbrella, but Emily persisted. "You don't look fine," she replied gently. "It's cold, and you're soaked. Let me help you." For a moment, the man simply stared at her, his gaze searching hers as though trying to gauge whether she truly meant what she said. Finally, he sighed and nodded reluctantly. "Thanks," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the sound of distant traffic. Emily smiled warmly, feeling a flicker of relief. "My name's Emily. What's yours?" "Jack," he replied after a pause. It was clear he didn't want to share more than that, but Emily didn't push him. Instead, she gestured toward the end of the street. "Come on. My apartment isn't far from here. You can dry off and warm up." Jack hesitated, clearly torn between accepting her offer and refusing it. Emily sensed his hesitation and quickly added, "I promise I'm not some creepy stranger luring you into trouble. I hate seeing people suffer when I know I can do something about it." Her sincerity must have convinced him because after a long moment, Jack nodded again. "All right. Thank you." As they walked side by side, Emily couldn't help but steal glances at her companion. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was something striking about him. His sharp jawline, the way his shoulders carried an invisible weight, and the intensity in his eyes when he occasionally glanced back at her. Whoever Jack was, Emily felt certain he had a story worth hearing. When they reached her modest apartment, a cozy space filled with bookshelves, potted plants, and mismatched furniture, Emily immediately set to work making him comfortable. She handed him a towel and rummaged through her closet for some dry clothes. While he changed, she brewed a pot of tea and warmed up leftover soup she'd made earlier in the week. By the time Jack emerged from the bathroom, wearing an oversized sweater and sweatpants that hung loosely on his lean frame, the aroma of food filled the room. He looked less miserable now, though still guarded. Emily motioned for him to sit at the small dining table and placed a steaming bowl of soup in front of him. Over the next few days, Emily and Jack fell into an unexpected rhythm. Though their initial meeting had been brief and somewhat awkward, there was an undeniable connection between them, a quiet understanding that transcended words. Jack stayed at Emily's apartment for a couple of nights, insisting he'd find his own place soon, But Emily wouldn't hear of it. "You're not ready yet," she told him firmly one evening as they sat together on her tiny couch sipping hot chocolate. "Besides, I don't mind the company." Jack chuckled softly, though his eyes still held traces of sadness. "You're too kind, Emily. Most people wouldn't go out of their way like this." "Well, maybe more people should," she replied with a shrug, her tone light but sincere. "Anyway, you've got me now, and I'm not letting you off the hook until you're back on your feet." Her determination made Jack smile despite himself. There was something refreshing about Emily, her optimism, her unwavering belief in doing what was right, even when it wasn't easy. He couldn't remember the last time someone had shown him such kindness without expecting anything in return. The following morning, Emily decided it was time to take action. She rummaged through her closet and pulled out an old bicycle she hadn't used in years. "Here," she said, handing it to Jack. "This will help you get around town while we figure things out." Jack raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "A bike? Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Emily said with a grin. "It's sturdy, trust me. Plus, it'll give you some exercise. You look like you could use it." He laughed, shaking his head. All right. Thanks, Emily. I owe you big time." "You can pay me back by sticking around long enough to tell me your story someday," she teased, though there was a hint of curiosity in her voice. Jack froze for a moment, his expression unreadable, before nodding slowly. "Maybe I will." As the days turned into weeks, Emily continued to help Jack navigate life in Willow Creek. She introduced him to Mrs. Thompson, the owner of a local cafe who was always looking for extra hands during busy hours. To Emily's delight, Mrs. Thompson hired Jack almost immediately, impressed by his polite demeanor and willingness to work hard. It wasn't glamorous work. He washed dishes, cleaned tables, and occasionally helped serve customers. But it gave Jack a sense of purpose again. Meanwhile, Emily found herself enjoying Jack's company more than she expected. They spent evenings talking about everything under the sun: books, music, dreams they'd once had but set aside over time. Jack spoke fondly of traveling the world, of mountains he'd climbed and oceans he'd swum in. Emily listened intently, imagining the adventures he described, marveling at how different his life seemed compared to hers. One night, as they strolled along the riverbank after dinner, Jack turned to her suddenly. "Why do you do it?" he asked, his voice tinged with both gratitude and confusion. "Helping me, I mean. You barely know me." Emily paused, considering his question carefully. "Because everyone deserves a chance to start over," she said finally. "Life has a way of knocking us down sometimes, but it's not the end unless we let it be. Besides," she smiled softly, meeting his gaze, "you seem like someone worth helping." Jack felt a lump rise in his throat. No one had ever spoken to him like that, like he mattered, like he was more than just a face in the crowd. For the first time in months, maybe even years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could turn around. But as much as Jack appreciated Emily's kindness, he couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. Every day he spent with her reminded him of the secret he carried, the truth about who he really was. He wanted to tell her, to explain why he'd ended up on that park bench in the first place. But fear held him back. What if she hated him for lying? What if she thought he was using her? Still, he couldn't deny the growing bond between them. Emily had a way of making the world feel lighter, brighter. Her laugh was infectious, her presence calming. Even the simplest moments with her, sharing meals, walking through the park, or sitting quietly reading side by side, felt special. Jack began to realize that he didn't just need her help, he genuinely cared about her. For Emily, the change in Jack was subtle but noticeable. The haunted look in his eyes softened with each passing day. He started smiling more often, engaging with others at the cafe, and even volunteering alongside her at the animal shelter on weekends. Watching him interact with the stray cats and dogs brought a warmth to Emily's heart. He had a natural way with animals, speaking to them gently, earning their trust effortlessly. Yet, despite their growing friendship, there were moments when Jack seemed distant, lost in thought. Once, while flipping through a magazine at the library where Emily worked, he froze upon seeing a familiar face staring back at him from an article. The headline read, "Where is Jonathan Reed?" Beneath it was a photo of a man who looked eerily similar to Jack, clean-shaven, impeccably dressed, exuding confidence. Emily noticed his reaction and frowned. "Is everything okay?" she asked cautiously. Jack quickly closed the magazine, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." Emily nodded, though doubt lingered in her mind. She wanted to press further, to ask what troubled him, but something stopped her. Deep down, she trusted Jack, even if she didn't fully understand him yet. Whatever burden he carried, she hoped he'd share it with her in his own time. Despite these unanswered questions, their connection only deepened. One chilly afternoon, as they sat together on the porch of Emily's apartment, wrapped in blankets and sipping tea, Jack glanced at her and said quietly, "I don't know what I did to deserve someone like you in my life." Emily smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. "You don't have to deserve it, Jack. Sometimes good things just happen." He studied her for a moment, memorizing the curve of her lips, the sparkle in her eyes. If only she knew the truth, he thought bitterly. Would she still see him the same way? Or would she turn away, disgusted by the lies he'd told? For now, though, Jack pushed those thoughts aside. All that mattered was the present, the laughter, the warmth, the fragile hope blossoming between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he vowed to protect Emily from harm, even if it meant protecting her from himself. As the weeks turned into months, Emily and Jack's bond grew stronger. Their friendship had blossomed into something neither of them had anticipated, a deep, unspoken connection that felt both comforting and exhilarating. Emily found herself looking forward to their evenings together, whether they were sharing meals, taking long walks through the park, or simply sitting in silence as she read and he sketched in a notebook he carried everywhere. Jack, too, cherished these moments, though he often caught himself wondering how much longer he could keep up the facade. Despite his growing affection for Emily, Jack remained haunted by the secret he carried. Every time he saw her smiling at him, trusting him implicitly, guilt gnawed at him like a persistent ache. He knew he couldn't hide forever, but the thought of telling her the truth terrified him. What if she hated him? What if she thought everything they'd built was a lie? The weight of his deception pressed down on him, heavier with each passing day. One crisp morning, as Emily watered the plants on her balcony, she noticed Jack staring intently at his phone. His brow was furrowed, his fingers hovering over the screen as though unsure whether to answer an incoming call. When he finally did, his voice was low and tense, almost inaudible. Curious, Emily leaned against the doorway, pretending to tidy up while keeping one ear tuned to the conversation. "Not now," Jack said sharply, pacing back and forth in the living room. "I told you, I'm done with all of that." There was a pause, followed by a frustrated sigh. "Look, I don't care what they're saying, just leave me out of it." When he hung up, he ran a hand through his hair, visibly agitated. Emily hesitated before stepping inside. "Everything okay?" she asked gently, trying not to sound too intrusive. Jack glanced at her, startled, as though he'd forgotten she was there. For a moment, he seemed conflicted, debating whether to brush her off or confide in her. Finally, he forced a smile. "Yeah, just an old business, nothing important." Emily nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in her mind. Over the past few weeks, she'd noticed subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. Jack occasionally received mysterious calls late at night, spoke cryptically about his past, and once, she'd seen him crumple up a newspaper article featuring a photo of a man who bore a striking resemblance to him. Each time she chose to let it slide, reminding herself that everyone had secrets, and that Jack had already been through so much. But this time, something about his demeanor unsettled her. She decided to press a little further. "You know, Jack, you can talk to me if something's bothering you. Whatever it is, I won't judge you." Jack's shoulders slumped, and for a fleeting second she thought he might finally open up. Instead, he shook his head, avoiding her gaze. "It's complicated, Emily. Trust me, you're better off not knowing." Her heart sank, but she didn't push him. Instead, she placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Whenever you're ready, I'm here." That night, as Emily lay in bed, sleep eluded her. Her mind raced with questions. Who was Jack, really? Why did he seem so guarded? And why did she feel a strange sense of familiarity whenever she looked at him, as though she'd seen him somewhere before? The next day, unable to shake her curiosity, Emily decided to do some digging. While Jack was working his shift at the cafe, she visited the library where she worked and searched online for any clues. At first, she found nothing unusual, just articles about local events and community news. But then, buried in the archives of a national newspaper, she stumbled upon a headline that made her blood run cold. Billionaire tech mogul Jonathan Reed missing after corporate scandal. Her breath hitched as she clicked on the article. The accompanying photo showed a clean-shaven man in a tailored suit, exuding confidence and power. Though his appearance was polished and refined, there was no mistaking those piercing eyes. They belonged to Jack. Emily sat frozen, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the details. According to the article, Jonathan Reed was the founder of a tech empire worth billions. However, allegations of fraud and betrayal by close associates had led to his sudden disappearance months ago. Some speculated he had faked his death, others believed he was hiding until the storm blew over. Her mind reeled. Jack, or rather Jonathan, wasn't just some stranger who needed help. He was a billionaire, a man with unimaginable wealth and influence. And he had been living under her roof, pretending to be someone else. For hours, Emily wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of her felt betrayed, angry even, that Jack hadn't trusted her enough to tell her the truth. But another, part of her understood why he might have kept it hidden. After all, she had welcomed him into her life without asking questions, offering only kindness and compassion. If their roles had been reversed, would she have revealed such a monumental secret? By the time Jack returned home that evening, Emily had composed herself. She greeted him warmly, masking the turmoil swirling inside her. Dinner was quiet, neither of them speaking much. As they cleaned up afterward, Emily finally broke the silence. "I need to ask you something," she began, her voice steady despite the nerves churning in her stomach. "And I want you to be honest with me." Jack froze, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "Okay," he said cautiously. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "Are you Jonathan Reed?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud, heavy and suffocating. Jack's face paled, and for a moment he looked as though he might bolt. But then with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "That's who I am." Emily exhaled sharply, relief mingling with frustration. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jack sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "Because I didn't want you to look at me differently," he confessed. "When I met you, I wasn't Jonathan Reed anymore. I was just Jack, a man who had lost everything and was trying to figure out who he was without the money, the fame, the expectations. You treated me like a human being, Emily, not like some rich guy with problems bigger than most people could imagine. I didn't want to ruin that." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened. Despite her initial anger, she couldn't deny the sincerity in his voice. "Do you realize how hard it is to hear this now?" she asked softly. "You've been lying to me this whole time." "I know," Jack replied, his voice cracking. "And I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you, Emily. You've given me more than anyone ever has. Trust, friendship, hope. I didn't want to risk losing that by telling you the truth." They sat in silence for a while, the weight of his confession settling between them. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice firm but gentle. "I need time to process this, Jack, or Jonathan, or whoever you are. But I want you to know that I value honesty above everything else. If we're going to move forward, there can't be any more secrets." The days that followed Jack's confession were tense and uncertain. Emily had asked for time to process everything, and Jack respected her request, though it felt like an eternity. He moved out of her apartment temporarily, staying in a small, rented room on the outskirts of town. The distance was physical, but emotionally it weighed heavily on both of them. For Emily, every quiet moment brought back memories of their shared laughter, late-night conversations, and the warmth of his presence. For Jack, guilt consumed him as he replayed her words in his mind. If we're going to move forward, there can't be any more secrets. Determined to prove himself worthy of her trust again, Jack decided to confront the demons he'd been running from. He reached out to his former lawyer, a sharp-witted woman named Clara, who had always been loyal to him despite the scandal. Tea. Coffee at a secluded cafe, he explained his situation, leaving nothing out. Not even his feelings for Emily. Clara listened intently, her expression unreadable until he finished speaking. Jonathan, she said finally, using his real name for emphasis, you've spent months hiding because you thought no one would understand. But now you have someone who does, or at least wants to try. Don't let fear keep you from fighting for what matters. Her words struck a chord. Jack realized he couldn't continue living in limbo, torn between his old life and the new one he desperately wanted with Emily. With Clara's help, he began piecing together a plan to clear his name and expose those responsible for the corporate betrayal that had forced him into exile. Meanwhile, Emily struggled with her own emotions. On one hand, she admired Jack's honesty after his admission. On the other, the enormity of his secret left her feeling overwhelmed. She confided in Mrs. Thompson, the kind-hearted cafe owner who had become something of a mentor to her over the years. He lied to me, Mrs. Thompson, Emily said one afternoon as they sat in the cafe's cozy corner booth. Not just once, but every single day since I met him. Mrs. Thompson sipped her tea thoughtfully before responding. Did he lie to deceive you or to protect himself? That doesn't make it right, Emily countered, though her voice lacked conviction. No, it doesn't, Mrs. Thompson agreed. But people aren't perfect, dear. Sometimes they do things out of fear or desperation. What matters is how they choose to fix it afterward. Has he tried to make amends? Emily hesitated. Despite her anger and confusion, she knew Jack regretted keeping the truth from her. His apology had been genuine, and the pain in his eyes when she pulled away still lingered in her memory. Yes, she admitted quietly. He has. Then maybe it's worth giving him another chance, Mrs. Thompson suggested gently. Not because he deserves it unconditionally, but because love isn't about perfection. It's about forgiveness and growth. Her words stayed with Emily long after their conversation ended. That night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, she made a decision. Whatever happened next, she owed it to herself and to Jack to hear him out completely. A few days later, Emily received a letter slipped under her door. It was handwritten, the ink smudged slightly as though written in haste. Her heart raced as she unfolded it. Dear Emily, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to explain everything. Why I disappeared, why I came here, and why meeting you changed my life. Please meet me tomorrow at the park where we first met. If you don't come, I'll understand. Yours always. Jack, her hands trembled as she read the note. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to shield herself from further heartache. But another part, a stronger part, knew she couldn't walk away without hearing him out. The next evening, she arrived at the park, her steps slow and hesitant. Jack was already there, standing beneath the same tree where they'd first encountered each other. He looked different somehow, clean-shaven, wearing a crisp shirt and jeans, but his eyes held the same vulnerability she remembered. Thank you for coming, he said softly as she approached. I'm not sure why I did, she replied honestly, folding her arms across her chest, but I figured I owed us both closure. Jack nodded, understanding her caution. I owe you the truth, Emily, all of it. No more hiding, no more lies. For the next hour, he laid bare his story. He spoke of building his tech empire from scratch, of the sacrifices he'd made along the way, and of the betrayal that had shattered his world. 2 of his closest associates had embezzled millions from the company and framed him for their crimes, knowing full well it would destroy his reputation. When the media turned against him, Jack had vanished, believing it was the only way to survive. But then I met you, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. You didn't care about my money or my title. You saw me as a person, a broken one. Yes, but still human. You gave me hope when I thought I'd lost everything, and that's why I couldn't bring myself to tell you who I really was. I was terrified of losing what we had. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she listened. Though his actions still hurt, she understood the weight of the choices he'd faced. Why are you telling me this now? She asked quietly. Because I realized I can't run anymore, he replied. I need to face my past head-on, not just for me, but for you. If there's even a chance we could have a future together, I want it to be built on honesty. Emily took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had imagined countless scenarios during their separation, but none quite like this. Finally, she spoke. I won't pretend this hasn't hurt me, Jack. Trust takes time to rebuild. But if you're willing to fight for us, for real this time, I'm willing to give it a shot. Relief washed over Jack's face, followed by determination. I'll do whatever it takes, Emily. Whatever you need. Over the following weeks, Jack threw himself into reclaiming his life. With Clara's guidance, he gathered evidence against his former associates, exposing their fraudulent activities through a series of anonymous leaks to investigative journalists. Meanwhile, Emily stood by his side, offering support while maintaining her independence. She refused to let their relationship hinge solely on his redemption. Instead, they worked together as equals, navigating the challenges ahead. One evening, as they walked along the riverbank, Jack stopped suddenly and turned to face her. Emily, he began, his voice trembling slightly. I never thought I'd find someone like you. Someone who sees me for who I am, flaws and all. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your trust. Emily smiled, her heart swelling with affection. You already are, Jack. Just don't forget where we started. Keep being the man I met on that rainy day, the one who needed help and wasn't afraid to ask for it. Hand in hand, they continued down, the path ready to face whatever lay ahead, together. The weeks that followed Jack's decision to confront his past were a whirlwind of activity. Armed with evidence and guided by Clara, he worked tirelessly to expose the truth behind the corporate scandal that had nearly destroyed him. It wasn't easy. There were moments when doubt crept in, when the weight of public scrutiny threatened to crush him, but Emily's unwavering support kept him grounded. She became more than just a source of comfort. She was his anchor, reminding him why he had chosen this path in the first place. Jack began by releasing carefully timed leaks to investigative journalists. These documents revealed the intricate web of deceit woven by his former associates, exposing their roles in embezzling millions from the company. At first, the media dismissed the information as speculation or an attempt at revenge by a disgraced billionaire. But as the leaks continued, undeniable patterns emerged, forcing authorities to take notice. Subpoenas were issued, audits conducted, and soon enough arrests were made. Through it all, Emily remained steadfastly by Jack's side. She attended press conferences not as his shadow, but as her own person, a librarian turned advocate for transparency and accountability. Her calm demeanor and articulate responses during interviews earned her admiration from reporters and the public alike. People marveled at how she stood beside Jack without being overshadowed by his wealth or fame. To Emily, though, none of that mattered. What mattered was standing up for what was right and ensuring Jack didn't lose himself in the process. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. As the story gained national attention, Jack faced intense backlash from those who still doubted his innocence. Old enemies resurfaced, hurling accusations and insults, while opportunistic strangers sought to exploit his vulnerability for personal gain. Through it all, Emily shielded him from negativity whenever possible, creating a safe space where he could recharge and refocus. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings with lawyers and investigators, Jack collapsed onto the couch in Emily's apartment. He looked exhausted, his usually sharp eyes dulled by fatigue. Emily handed him a cup of tea and sat beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "No matter how hard it gets, remember that." Jack sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just wish I could turn back time, undo everything that happened. Maybe then I wouldn't have put you through all this." Emily shook her head firmly. "Don't say that. If anything, this has shown me who you really are. Not the billionaire tech mogul, but the man willing to fight for justice even when it costs him everything. That's the person I fell in love with." Her words brought tears to Jack's eyes. For so long, he had believed wealth and success defined him. But Emily had taught him otherwise. She valued integrity over riches, kindness over power. Inspired by her example, Jack decided to use his resources to give back to the community that had embraced him during his darkest days. With Emily's help, he funded several local projects aimed at improving life in Willow Creek. The library, where she worked, received a state-of-the-art renovation, complete with expanded collections, digital archives, and programs for children and seniors. The animal shelter she volunteered at was transformed into a modern facility equipped with veterinary services, adoption events, and educational workshops. Together, they established scholarships for students pursuing careers in technology, science, and literature, ensuring future generations would have opportunities they might not otherwise afford. These acts of generosity weren't about redemption for Jack, they were about gratitude. Every ribbon-cutting ceremony, every thank you note from a scholarship recipient, reminded him of the second chance Emily had given him. And with each passing day, their bond grew stronger, rooted in shared values and mutual respect. Yet despite their progress, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he owed Emily something more tangible, a gesture that would show her just how much she meant to him. One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves swirled around them during their daily walk, he stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "Emily," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling inside him. "You've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. You've shown me what it means to truly care for someone, not because of what they can offer, but because of who they are. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'll always be the man you deserve." Before Emily could respond, he knelt down on one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple yet elegant diamond ring, its brilliance catching the sunlight. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his eyes shining with hope and vulnerability. For a moment, Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face, lighting up her entire being. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Of course, yes." As Jack slipped the ring onto her finger, the world around them seemed to fade away. All that mattered was the promise they had made, to stand together through thick and thin, to build a life rooted in love, trust, and purpose. In the months leading up to their wedding, Jack and Emily poured their energy into planning a celebration that reflected their journey. They opted for an intimate gathering at the park where they had first met, transforming it into a magical setting filled with twinkling lights, fragrant flowers, and soft music. Friends, family, and neighbors gathered to witness their union, many moved to tears by the couple's heartfelt vows. "I promise to honor your kindness, your strength, and your unwavering belief in doing good," Jack said, holding Emily's hands tightly. "You've taught me that true wealth lies not in money but in the connections we forge and the lives we touch. And I promise to stand by you, no matter what comes our way," Emily replied, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "Because loving you isn't about the life you once led, it's about the man you've become." As they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted into applause, cheering for the couple whose love story had captured the hearts of everyone who knew them. In that moment, surrounded by joy and laughter, Jack and Emily realized they had found something far greater than happiness. They had discovered the beauty of humanity in its purest form. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, with the crisp autumn air carrying a hint of frost. The park where Jack and Emily had first met was transformed into a scene straight out of a fairy tale. Twinkling string lights hung from tree branches, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Tables draped in ivory linens were adorned with bouquets of wildflowers, daisies, sunflowers, and sprigs of lavender, each chosen to reflect Emily's love for simplicity and nature. A small band played soft melodies as guests mingled, their laughter blending with the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Emily stood at the edge of the clearing, her heart racing as she adjusted the delicate lace veil atop her head. Her dress was modest yet elegant, a flowing gown that hugged her figure just enough to highlight her grace without overshadowing her natural beauty. She glanced at the makeshift altar, where Jack waited nervously, his hands clasped tightly together. He wore a classic navy suit paired with a burgundy tie, a nod to the colors of fall surrounding them. His eyes met hers briefly, and despite the crowd, it felt as though they were the only two people in the world. Mrs. Thompson, who had become like a second mother to Emily, approached her with a reassuring smile. "You look stunning, dear," she said, giving Emily's hand a gentle squeeze. "Are you ready?" Emily took a deep breath, her lips curving into a radiant smile. More than ever. As she walked down the aisle lined with candles and flower petals, escorted by her younger brother Charlie, every step seemed to echo the journey she and Jack had taken together. From that rainy afternoon on a park bench to this moment under the stars, their story had been anything but ordinary. Yet here they were, surrounded by loved ones, about to begin a new chapter filled with promise and hope. When Emily reached the altar, Jack extended his hand, his expression softening as he gazed at her. "You're breathtaking," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the music. "So are you," she replied, her cheeks flushing slightly. The ceremony was simple yet deeply meaningful. The officiant, a close friend of Emily's from the library, spoke of resilience, trust, and the transformative power of love. As Jack and Emily exchanged vows, there wasn't a dry eye in sight. Jack's words painted a vivid picture of gratitude for Emily's kindness, her strength, and her ability to see beyond his flaws. In turn, Emily promised to stand by him through every triumph and challenge, cherishing not the man he used to be but the one he had grown into because of her influence. "I vow to honor your humanity," she said, her voice steady and full of conviction. "To celebrate your victories, comfort you in your struggles, and remind you daily of how much you mean to me." When they sealed their vows with a kiss, the crowd erupted into cheers, applause, and even a few joyful tears. It was a moment of pure joy, a testament to the love that had blossomed between two people who couldn't have been more different yet perfectly suited for each other. After the ceremony, the celebration continued with food, dancing, and heartfelt speeches. Mrs. Thompson raised her glass first, recounting the day Emily brought Jack into the cafe looking disheveled but determined. "I knew then that something special was happening," she said, her eyes twinkling. "And now, seeing them here today, I can say with certainty that some stories are meant to be written in the stars." Next, Charlie stood up, his youthful energy bringing smiles to everyone's faces. "When Em told me about Jack, I thought she was nuts," he admitted, eliciting laughter from the crowd. "But meeting him changed my mind. He's not just a brother-in-law, he's family. And if anyone deserves happiness, it's these two." Finally, Clara, Jack's loyal lawyer and confidant, delivered an emotional toast. "Jonathan Reed taught me a lot about business," she began, earning knowing nods from those familiar with his past. "But Jack Carter taught me about humility, redemption, and the importance of starting over. Today I'm proud to call both versions of him my friend, and prouder still to see him standing beside someone as extraordinary as Emily." As the evening wore on, Jack pulled Emily aside for a quiet moment beneath the same tree where they had first crossed paths. The air was cool, and the sound of distant laughter mingled with the rustling leaves. Jack wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "Do you remember that day?" he asked, gesturing toward the bench where their story began. "How could I forget?" Emily replied, leaning into him. "I had no idea you'd end up being the love of my life." Jack chuckled, softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Neither did I. But I do know this. I wouldn't trade a single moment of our journey for anything. Not the struggles, not the secrets, not even the rain. Emily smiled, resting her head against his chest. It's funny, isn't it? People always talk about finding the one, like it's supposed to happen instantly. But for us, it was about growing together, learning from each other. That's what makes this so special. Jack nodded, holding her tighter. Here's to many more chapters, Em. Whatever comes next, we'll face it side by side. Months later, as winter gave way to spring, Jack and Emily settled into their new life together. They purchased a cozy home on the outskirts of Willow Creek, complete with a sprawling garden where Emily planted flowers and herbs. Jack converted the attic into a workspace, using it to mentor young entrepreneurs and develop innovative technologies, aimed at improving lives rather than profits. Together, they continued supporting local causes, ensuring their impact reached far beyond themselves. Their relationship remained a testament to the idea that love isn't built on material wealth or societal expectations, but on mutual respect, understanding, and shared values. Whether volunteering at the animal shelter, hosting community events, or simply enjoying quiet evenings by the fireplace, they found joy in the little things, the moments that reminded them why they had fought so hard to be together. One sunny afternoon, as they strolled hand in hand through the park, Emily paused to watch children playing near the bench where their story had begun. "Do you think they'll find their own adventures someday?" she asked, nodding toward the giggling kids. Jack followed her gaze, smiling warmly. "If they're lucky, maybe someone will give them a chance, just like you gave me." Emily turned to him, her eyes shining with affection. "Luck had nothing to do with it, Jack. You earned your second chance, and so did I." As they walked away, bathed in golden sunlight, it was clear that their love story wasn't just about finding happiness. It was about discovering the beauty of humanity in its purest form, kindness, forgiveness, and the courage to start over, even when the odds seem insurmountable. And in that realization, they found their happily ever after.